Just one quick comment. I think also when you start thinking about how gender differences start to play out, that is how men may have a hard time if you start using words like volunteer, because it's perceived to be a women's role to be volunteer, and men's identity it seems to be more strongly tied to paid work. So there are all these interesting questions when you start thinking not just in terms of income, but also gender.
As you market the program or any of these programs to the CSEP, to the aging population, isn't, we keep talking about having meaningful jobs, but what's meaningful to one person isn't going to be meaningful to another. There's a lot of talk about meaningful jobs, but isn't that sort of a pitfall? Isn't that a danger of over-marketing, and then somebody, you know, even though they're working for a nonprofit or the government, they may not see their job as meaningful?
Well, actually, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. In many ways, that's one of the questions that we hope to learn more about through the 4 Innovations grants that we gave to 4 of our experienced CSEP operators. CSEP has always been, from the very beginning, the idea was to really be a very individual-oriented program. You start with what that particular individual who you brought into the program, what do they need in terms of employment and training, but also what is it that interests them? And then you find a host agency, a nonprofit in the community that matches that particular older person's interests and skill level and location. But I think among some of our sub-grantees that we've given this Innovations grant to, it's really pushing that even further. So for example, in Memphis, and I think Phyllis has just left, but our sub-grantee in Memphis is looking at the nonprofit sector of the Memphis regional economy as an economic sector, and looking at what are some of the commonalities that cut across the nonprofit organizations in Memphis, and how then is there any particular fit, or are there some modifications that the CSEP program can take into account as they both recruit and prepare low-income older people to take positions in the nonprofit sector. So it is, I think you're raising another really interesting point.
Two things. First, just a comment in terms of the outcomes measurement. In a very non-scientific way, annually we survey the people who are in that program and ask more detailed questions related to the well-being, and it definitely fits all those, is successful in doing that. But I guess I also want to thank you for bringing up the issue of social justice in terms of civic engagement, and just ask how you would suggest that on a local level we could go about trying to affect public policy, and what might work.
I think right now civic engagement is very in. And I'll speak to my state, Massachusetts. The governor identified civic engagement as one of his top 3 priorities and has created a commission around it. And one of the questions I'm interested in is, there's a lot of new type of civic organizations emerging. I'm wondering, are they thinking about including elders in them? Are they intergenerational? I'm interested in the long-standing organizations that are focused around elders. Are they reaching out towards low income, towards people who have physical disabilities, et cetera? I think, right now there's a number of states that are developing commissions around this or boards around it. I think there's a number of philanthropic organizations that are funding civic engagement, and I think it's important to bring the voice to them about low-income seniors so that they're at the table. I think, we have a role to play in raising the issue, because people don't realize when it's missing from the table, who's not there. And those are where decisions get made and money gets divided et cetera. So I do see it in very much a grassroots level. About the outcomes, I think the other way we're a voice is we need to make sure we advocate that the only outcomes measured aren't just employment or dollars earned, and that we look at social well-being, psychological well-being, social isolation. We bring these important impacts to be measured. Because once again, if they're not measured, you don't have the data, they're not valued. Well, Marty may be able to talk a little bit about that. Do you want to say anything, Marty? Because I think right now, as this evaluation goes forward, it's critical that we push to make sure that the right things are measured, that it isn't just focused on the dollar amount earned. The other is, I think we need to do the research ourselves and advocate for it. I mean, as Tony was talking, and I think this might go back to the prior person's question, I want to know what are these individual goals and objectives that people are bringing into this when they come to CSAP, and can we look how these change over time? And can we follow people over time to get a sense of, do their social networks change? Do they, for those of us who do look at social networks, are they getting social capital? Are they bridging? I did a project in public housing, and if we looked at people who got employed in the local corner grocery store, they pretty much continued to relate to other low-income individuals. Those we got jobs in a wealthier community in a bank, got education. They found out this person's daughter goes to ballet lessons here. I can get a scholarship to, so there's social capital we can look at. We can look at bridging. We can look at psychological well-being, et cetera. But we need to make sure these things get measured and that they get studied so that we have the evidence to bring back and make the case. I think a lot of this is about making the case.
Yeah, I think also, as we all know, whatever gets measured is what gets done. And what I think we have an opportunity to, because there will be a new administration, whichever party, is to really, and certainly when we go back to look at reauthorization of the Older Americans Act in 2011, it is trying to figure out, so what are the outcomes that ought to be built into the legislation? I also think that this is directly, your question is directly tied to other sessions in this conference, which is examining the state of advocacy in the aging network. Because after all, the Older Americans Act and AAAs have a legislated mission of advocacy. But I think most people, I would agree that the state of advocacy in terms of the aging community is at a very sad state right now. And we need to really re-examine what this means. Finally, again, going back to our innovations grants, we gave one of the grants to one of our sub-grantees who's running an Older Workers Leadership Development Institute that really is going to increase the civic literacy of the CSAP participants so they see how decisions do get made in their own community and link it to national policies like the Older Americans Act. Finally, 2 of the 4 organizations we gave grants to for this innovations, in my opinion, not surprisingly, are community action agencies who understand from their own legacy that it's bottoms-up, grassroots, getting older, low-income people, poor people, the tools they need to speak for themselves, to speak with their own voice. And I think, again, we hope by the end of this year, we'll have more information to give and share with the rest of the community. I think I think we're done. Robert, you need to start up, right? Right. Thank you very much. Please, anyone who would like to stay in touch with what we're doing, and certainly Judith, thank you for coming and giving a presentation. Look forward to seeing you all next year or at other conferences.